welcome again every Thursday evening to our weekly Mass Participation World webinar series. Tonight, COVID-safe case studies, lessons from completed and approved events. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Robb, the CEO and founder of Mass Participation World, author of Mass Participation Sports Events, and delighted to be joined by a very international panel that's going to test my pronunciation skills tonight. First up, we welcome Makis Asimakopoulos, the GM of the Athens Marathon, the Authentic, joining us obviously from Athens in Greece. Welcome, Makis. Nice to see you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks
Wonderful.
for inviting me here. Hello, everybody.
Wonderful, and looking forward to hearing about your plans for Athens Marathon. There's some great insights there. Joining us from Perth in Western Australia, Dave Budge, the Operations Director of the event team from Perth, as I said, and Dave's going to share with us some details of a couple of events that he's just had approval for, the Act Belong Commit Dwelling Up 100 Mountain Bike Classic and the Mighty Jarrah Trail Run. Hi, Dave. Great to see you.
Good evening, everyone, or good morning, wherever you're from.
Thank you. And Mike Morris, Vice President Production, Spartan, joining us from Boston in the US. And we were just talking before I was aware of Spartan races in Florida, Hungary, and Taiwan. Mike was telling me they just got one away in Korea, which we're going to hear about. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for joining us early in the morning, your time.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, guys.
Thanks so much. And then joining us from Madeira in Portugal, big welcome to Alcino Pereira, the Technical Director of the Association for Athletics Regional from Funchal in Madeira. Welcome, Alcino. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for welcoming me in this meeting.
And I'm going to try and present the name of your event, but I'm sure I'm going to bungle it, so I might get you to help us out. Corrida Dia da Reggio, which in translated means Region Day Race.
Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. So let me just pop in before we get underway. I'll end the poll as expected. Most of us from the mass participation industry, but a good smattering of people from other parts as well. A couple of other quick announcements in terms of other things that Mass Participation World has on, which I know some of you here join, but maybe some of those of you that may not be aware. Every Monday, we have a Strength in Numbers call, which is 4:30 p.m. Singapore time, which is literally an open Zoom room where people just come together to share their challenges and observations. I just announced a couple of weeks ago the intention to stage a Mass Participation World online summit. I put a survey out, and for those of you that might still like to give us your feedback, we'll be taking some of that feedback for about another week. But at the moment, it looks like the preferred date for that is the last week of September. So we'll be coming back with some feedback on that and some feedback on the content and so on. The aid station, which many of you have seen, Mike's boss, Joe DeSena, was one of our guests a while ago. We've had Andrew Messick on it. We're hopeful that Mike Nishi, who's on the call, is going to join us in a few weeks' time. But I think we put out today episode 65 or 66, 15-minute interviews with people from all over the world. Makis was on the show last week. And so, yeah, just tune in if that's of interest to you, but also really interested for additional guests, always looking for people from all over the world. And then these webinars every Thursday. Next week, we're going to be speaking about content creation. If I can help you at any stage, please feel free to email me directly, chris@chrisrobb.asia, or connect with me on LinkedIn or the Mass Participation World Facebook page. I'm just going to pop one more poll in whilst I go through what we're going to cover in the next little while. So just trying to get an indication of service areas within the industry. So over the next kind of 55 minutes or so, we've allocated an hour tonight. We're going to talk across 7 key areas. We're going to talk about approvals and permits. We're going to talk about communication, so communication with participants, partners, and public. We're going to talk about, obviously, operational issues, which I think are going to be the core of it. So start, finish, course, transmission mitigation strategies and tactics for both staff and customers. We're going to talk about volunteers and spectators and some of the challenges, obviously, around getting volunteers and managing spectators. What's obviously on everyone's minds, I think, is budget. How does this impact our budget, and how does it ensure insurance if we're able to get ahead with these events? and then the importance of post-event feedback from both customers and staff, and the role that plays in being able to get and move forward in terms of the lessons we have. So maybe let's, if I may, please start with you, Mike. You've obviously been successful in getting a number of those events away, and I'd love to get a bit of a sense of, how you went about the permitting, some of the challenges, some of maybe the lessons for people that you might be able to share from that perspective, please.
Yeah, I think we're fortunate that we have some great partners. And I guess I first should start with, thank you for having me again, and it's an honor to be here to be talking to so many amazing people in this industry, in this space. So thanks for listening. I think we're lucky we have some great partners, both domestically, internationally, that we work with a lot. So there's a lot of trust there that we've built over the time. For example, the Jacksonville event, which I was heavily involved with, we've put on numerous races there. So they really trust us inherently. So the process was fairly organic. We went, we spoke to the health department, spoke to the mayor, and it was just kind of right place, right time. And I think our partners are finding the same, where they're working with the local municipals and getting the permission, however way it is. And we're finding too, some are much more structured in that progress or process, and some not as much. And so we're trying to really work with each local municipal to figure out, are there restrictions on things like masks or a number of people on site at one time. We're fortunate in that we let loose heats every hour or every 5 minutes, whatever it is, every interval, as opposed to a mass event where you're sending off 10,000 people one time. So we're able to really engineer the flow of the people on site. So we use that when we talk to the municipals to say, hey, this is our approach. And when they say, you can only have 200 people on site at one time, we treat our event almost like a 4-wall retail space where we can have a capacity limit and then control the number of people that show up at one time, as opposed to saying, all right, you can only have 200 people on site, and then be scratching our heads to think, wow, how are we gonna have a 200-person event? Because we could have a 5,000-person event, but only have 200 people on site at one time, for example. It would just be a long day. So, and
so that obviously being successful in getting 4 events happening on a fairly global basis, as you've been pretty successful in that. And in terms of your pipeline, you've got a few others that look like they're going to come online fairly soon.
Correct. I mean, we're aggressively pushing domestically, working with different municipals. It looks like we're going to be lucky too in Central Europe, with a couple more events coming up there. Different parts of Europe as well. Asia's been a great spot for us. So yeah, well, there's definitely some on the horizon for Q3, Q4.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Makis, so, a big one for you, 10,000 participants broken into, 5,000 people, 5,000 people races, and we'll speak a little bit more on the operations, which you were sharing with me the other day. But from a permitting and approvals perspective, any key tips that you could give, please?
I'm the only one. I cannot hear you, or it's only you?
Can the others hear me?
I'm the only one. I cannot hear you, or we have a
Yeah, everyone else seems to be able to hear you. Hear me. We can hear.
But okay, all right. So I didn't hear the entire question, but can you please? For some reason, your voice was lost, or was was not clear. Chris,
why don't I'll come back to you. Let's go across at this stage. Maybe to you, Dave. You've just got approval for your mountain bike race and trail race, and it's quite a unique event. Maybe give us a sense of some of the hurdles that you overcame there.
Yeah, look, if I could probably take it back a step from Mike, or elaborate on that process. So it was important, mass participation events or gatherings, definitely not a priority for statutory permit authorising agencies, police department now, health department, who sign off on those. So I found it really beneficial, to get into that conversation, through alliances, so that we were considered, and that we were able to demonstrate. So probably, if you're out there wondering where to go, and I know different parts of the world are in different phases of, being able to run events. We were at a point where, and I think it was sort of common feedback in this community that, you know, we weren't sure when we were going to come back and in what capacity, what volume would we have. So if you are able to sort of get yourself into those conversations, I would thoroughly recommend that. You know, at the very least, you're going to be informed about, you know, potentially when you can come back to run an event and in what sort of format, whether there's, you know, restrictions around those. So was able to do that. And, you know, you can also influence the outcome as well, because if people aren't aware of, you know, the nuances of different styles of events and, you know, the different risk levels as well, you know, particularly with the event that we've got coming up in September, you know, regional event through trails, naturally spaced out, probably a much lesser risk, you know, for community spread than say another one of the events that we do, which is a fun run for 35,000 people, where, you know, start lines, you know, crowds of, you know, of 5-6 people per square metre. So, you know, being able to get that and fed through to the relevant authorities, so that when they did create those phases coming out as well, you know, that we're able to be considered and actually included in the description of the phases to say this style of event, you know, is approved. So that, you know, that certainly helped that and gave us, you know, a little bit of clarity around where we were able to go. And so we could push on. I think, you know, a lot of us were sitting around working on events with no confidence that that actually, you know, happen. So that was able to, you know, we're able to sort of, you know, create our event plans around, you know, around that. So, and then, you know, and we'll get onto it, you know, a little bit later, you know, developing those COVID safety plans that address the specifics of your activity. You know, there's tons of documents out there from every national sporting association, every health department, you know, that are broad. But if you can demonstrate the specifics to your activity, you know, you can probably lead it a little bit. I think I'm not sure your experience, Mike, but what we found is that we're probably moving faster than, you know, the health departments. Their focus is on the general community, not so much on the specifics of, you know, a Spartan event versus a mountain bike race versus a, you know, marathon style event as well. So if you can assist and take the lead on that, you know, and, you know, through, you know, that process, you know, demonstrate, you know, that you've covered all the risks or identified all the risks, you know, then that pathway through to sign off for approvals, I think it's going to be a bit easier.
Yeah, that's great. If I could jump in, Chris, one bit of feedback that onto that is, and that's great insight, David. We have great luck working with tourism boards or CVBs that are responsible for tourism and bringing events to the area, obviously. So it's, if we can find an advocate internally, then it helps with those conversations like you're talking about to get involved with the decision making. I've also found too that instead of just sending the local municipal a 30-page SOP around COVID mitigation, right, it really helps to get on the phone and talk through these things and ask them, like, what are your concerns? Because as you guys know, no one wants a 30-page document to land on their email and have to walk through. It's just going to fall on glassy eyes. So I think having conversations, finding that advocate in the municipal, whether it's a tourism person that is really focused on this, to have your back and talk, and start those conversations is important.
Yeah, great insights. Alcino, and, you know, a small event in your small country or small island part of Portugal is obviously a bigger country. Some insights in terms of how you came about getting that event happening, with working with authorities and so on?
Well, we've been in complete lockdown till late April, and in May we began to be permitted to having some training sessions on the track, and after all we proposed to the authorities, local authorities, to start competing at 1 of July. 1 of July is our regional day, so and we usually have that race, commemorative race, and well, they were sympathetic about that idea, and as long as we guarantee some social distancing and other safety rules, and we commit to that, and we bring the event. It's a small event, so no big problem.
And you were saying before we came on air that it was a 400. It's normally a 400 people event. You had 100 people in it. So was that you going and making a concession, or was that them, the authorities imposing that limit on you?
It was from both sides, but we have that was an argument to let us make the competition.
Yeah.
So we propose to have a first 100 event. The second will be with 150 people, and we will progress step by step. So tomorrow we will be holding the second event, the second race with 150 people.
Fantastic.
And, 2 weeks from now, we are increasing numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is, to me, I think this is the example that we're all, the more of these that we have, this step by step we can grow. Thank you. Makis, hopefully you can hear me now. So, you know, you're normally a really huge event. You've scaled down to 10,000. Maybe just in terms of the permitting and approvals, we're going to come into the logistics in a little bit, but, you know, some of the background into that and any tips that might be useful for people listening, please.
Well, first of all, our event is usually the second week of November. So the second weekend of November is the Athens Marathon, and includes a marathon race, a 10K, and then 5K race. So actually, we're going to have 10,000 participants for the marathon race, but at the same time, all this weekend, we're going to have 10,000 more for the 5K and 10,000 more for the 10K. So in total, the event would be 30,000 people. So listening to your numbers so far, I'm now terrified what we are going to do in this November. But yes, we're talking about an event of total 30,000 participants. We are going to take advantage of the way that Greece so far has dealt with the coronavirus crisis. We were in complete lockdown until mid-May in Greece. And since then, gradually all business opened up. And since July 1st, we opened up to tourism for a number of countries from around the world. And so we went to the authorities and we told them that we do have a plan, we have a protocol. We would like to organize the Athens Marathon for this year in order to keep going with, let's say, a good record of Greece dealing with virus all these months, and the government is behind us. The health authorities have given us the approval to go ahead under the concept that we're going to organize individual races of 5,000 people most, but we can have more than one individual races within the weekend, as long as these individual races are 1 hour apart, one from each other. So this is the concept here. So the number is 30,000 for the entire weekend, 10,000 per race for marathon, 10K, and 5K. And just to complete, we're going to have a test of our plans pretty soon. On September 20th, we organize the Athens Half Marathon with 2 distances, half marathon and 5K. And we have already registered and completed the registration, 5,000 people for the half marathon and 10,000 people for the 5K, which is going to be split in 2 different races, race A, race B, of 5,000 participants in each. On top of everything, we organize smaller races all around Greece, starting September 6th, with 2,500 participants in various cities, and that will take us gradually with all these tests to the big one, which is the marathon on November 7-8.
Oh, so great building blocks, yeah. Mike, let's come back to you and stop, because I think a lot of people here are going to be really interested in delving into the operations, and I love for us not to run out of time. There's lots of other things we'd like to talk about, but I think people are really keen to hear what are some of the changes that you made. Maybe you can give us some oversights in terms of, you know, how you came to your operational plan, what worked, and you're now into your fourth event. How much have you had to tweak that and learn and evolve, please?
Yeah, it's great. We created an internal SOP to help guide our partners as well as ourselves, and it's level based. So similar to most governments, we have 3 levels that dictate sort of the operating capacity and the requirements for our partners. 1 is very conservative, 1 is a little more, 2 is middle, 3 is a lot more aggressive in terms of going back closer to normal. In that, there's some very binary prescriptions like yes or no on spectators, or festival challenges or sponsor activations, right? And then it just gives general guidance around PPE, sanitization, social distancing. And so that's the basis for what our partners are using. In terms of the actual strategies and tactics, I'm happy to get into what, say the customer facing ones. And I think it's important to realize too that don't forget about your staff. It's easy to think, what does the customer want to see? But we have to keep our staff safe. So we have a whole list of protocols for our staff, but the primary ones we've implemented for our customers, 1, we screened every customer that walked in the door or into the festival. And we did that with, it was an observation by a medic, as well as a questionnaire to ask if they have any symptoms of COVID or if they've been around anyone. And then we do a non-contact IR thermometer temperature check to make sure they don't have a fever. It was interesting. Our event in Florida, it was hot. It was 90 degrees, and so we were concerned about just the hot weather influencing that. It was 90, 95 degrees, and as long as people weren't standing in the sun, and we did a lot of questions around, as long as people weren't standing facing the sun and getting that kind of radiative heat, they were fine. We did have to turn one person away who was a medic who showed up, and she answered yes, I'd been around someone, because she was a frontline worker, so we had to send her back. But otherwise, everyone passed the screens. From a sanitization standpoint, we had hand sanitizer after every major touch point in festival, and then after every single obstacle. I think we ordered 200 gallons of hand sanitizer that were delivered. We didn't use as much as we thought we were going to, but it's good to have it. We had spray disinfectant available at all the touch points. So say there's a spot where someone had to sign a waiver on a digital screen, or they want to look up the results. We had a spray bottle with a wipe that you could wipe it down, and that was for the customers to use. One of the trickiest parts is water stations, which we're still working on a more technologically advanced solutions. But normally we work with bulk water and distribute through cups, but we've moved to bottled water for now, which is a challenge because in some of the markets you can't find smaller bottles, especially overseas, and so they've had to be creative. But we're trying to work through the solution there. But domestically, we've in the U.S. we're using a bottled water solution, which isn't green. It's annoying for me. We did find a recycling vendor in Florida, but working through that. We don't have any open food and beverage. Everything's pre-made and brought on site. Beer, for example, it comes in a can as opposed to an open cup. We would typically hand swag out like medals and stuff. Just you walk down the line and grab it. We pre-packaged everything and gave it to people in the bags, so there's less touch points from customers. We just got rid of a couple of the obstacles that, perception wise might raise some eyebrows. The sandbag carry is carried up near your face and your shoulder. Some of the water obstacles. From a social distancing standpoint, I've already talked about how we've engineered the number of people on site. I think that's important, right? So it's normally we would put 1,000 people, 1,200 people through every hour. In this case, in the first event, we knocked it down to about 30% of our typical capacity, and we reduced the frequency of the heat. So we were running 25 people every 5 minutes. And then we were able to build a start corral, which then had the markings on the ground where we could socially distance everyone. And then we told everyone they couldn't show up any earlier than 30 minutes prior to the heat. Normally people show up anytime they want. You get this big spike in the morning. We worked through that, but we really engineered when people show up, and we controlled that flow. And that enabled us to really get a handle on knowing and predicting how many people we'd have in the festival or on site at one time. I mentioned getting rid of spectators. We adjusted other aspects of the festival, such as the finish sequence. And what we were really proactive about was a lot of signage to denote like places where people would wait at obstacles, or maybe they're waiting in line for registration. We put those wait here signs every 6 feet. And we even created sort of entryway arches and gates, if you call it, that would show people where to stand in line to denote where that 6 feet was. And we use those at obstacles. We use that in registration. We use that at the medical screening. We increased the car spacing for parking. Let's see, those are the big, and masks. All the volunteers and staff had to wear masks. And then we had sneeze guards and clear protective acrylic screens, or clear sidewalls actually work really great hanging from tents that we were able to cut. We hung those at all the major interaction points to separate out the customer from the staff person and the volunteer that was working, and that was found to be pretty effective.
Yeah, and the behavior of the customers, as you call them, were they, were you having to kind of force people to stay back? Because I mean, yours is typically, as I understand it, I haven't done one yet. I must put my hand up and say it, but people helping each other over obstacles and all those kind of things. Was there that temptation for people to step in and help each other, and you had to have volunteers holding them back, or?
Sure. Yeah, no, we did a lot to educate the customer in advance to say, hey, we know you like to high five and hug and help each other out, but let's do the right thing and keep your distance. What we found, generally speaking, is when we kept people within a flow, right? When they went from, for example, the place where we checked their times to make sure they weren't early, to the temperature screen, to registration, and when we kept them in a systematic flow, everyone was great and socially distant really well. But you could tell the minute they got out of that sort of the flow or that process, and people were kind of waiting for something, they'd go back to their normal habits that they probably dealt with every day, which, depending on the market, could be talking to people without a mask, right, or going, right? So we definitely started to see that situation where outside of those specified processes, you'd get people that would sort of wander back to their normal, organically go back to their normal behaviors. So what we're trying to really do now is how do we just force that function of that kind of stepwise process throughout the entire journey, right? So it's easy from getting to the start, but then when they finish, right, how do we still make them comfortable, not impact really the core DNA of the brand, and make it a good experience, but at the same time, like, get them out of the festival so they're not lingering around.
Yeah.
How did that go down, Mike, if I can ask that? I mean, having to make changes, which we're all looking to do, how much change can you make without sort of compromising the product or impacting the experience?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but just the feedback from the customer was amazing. The customer sentiment, so NPS was a 90 for that event, and just for perspective, in the February event we had there was an 87. Our 2019 average was 81. So the feedback was amazing, right? And the quotes from the surveys were things like, "I felt safer at the Spartan race than I did at the grocery store. It still felt like a Spartan race." There's some videos floating around the internet from, I think, Fitz Kohler. Put a great one up there. 95% of the customer surveys said they would attend another event with the same measures in place, and then 97% surveyed said they felt extremely safe or safe. So on a 1 to 5 scale, 4 or 5 being safe or extremely safe, 97% fell in that 4 or 5, which is great. So both this sort of anecdotal feedback, me being on the ground and talking to people as they left, I think people felt like it still felt like a Spartan race. And that was really important to us, was maintaining that kind of core DNA. So I think the magic there is the controlling the number of people on site, and then just having these measures in place that felt organic as part of the flow, as opposed to very, very laborious, if you will.
Fantastic. Alcino, let's come to you, as staying with the theme of ones that have happened already, albeit on a smaller level. And obviously you must have done something right to be able to grow to a next one. But what were some of the measures you put in place, some of the feedback, some of the challenges that you might have had even with a small crowd, please?
Well, we had some restrictions to select the people who is going to run. We have a ranking, annual ranking from our affiliates. Most every athlete is affiliate. It's not so much people, and we let the clubs where they are affiliated to choose the ones who want to compete, and we gave them a quota, so they choose till we get 100 people. Then we in the procedures we have everybody with a mask. We provide a mask to everybody. We have temperature control. They have to use a mask till the we have a pre-box, pre-starting box, and we have a starting boxes. When they are check-in till the pre-box, they have to put their masks. When they go to the starting box with only 20 people at each time, and with ground marks, to have the distance. And then they could take their masks, leave it on a pocket, or they could take it with them in the end. And we give starts to every 20 people. They start, another 20 people get in, and then they start. And the times, we as we have a ranking, we put the best ones in the first group, and then and so on. And the classification was with the cheat time. So when they pass the starting till the end, that would give the final ranking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was mainly that. We have no the prize they collect at the end. When they arrive, they continue moving. They collect their prizes and the offer kits, and they go along. As Mike said, after they leave the event, people start acting like usual, and going on groups and conversations. Of course, it's human, so human comportment.
Yeah, thank you. Makis, you were sharing with me the other night in extreme detail how you're going to be planning your start waves, and I think that would be valuable to share with people. If you wouldn't mind sharing some of those insights, please.
Yes. Well, the major difference this year is that in our usual races, let's say a marathon of 20,000 participants, we split them in blocks, 12 to 15 blocks usually of 15,000 people, runners per block. And then we give a start time for each block. And in order to alleviate the road, we have a time difference between the blocks of 2 minutes. So the first of the next block starts 2 minutes later or 3 minutes later after the previous block. This time will be totally different. We're gonna have a race of 5,000, an individual race, and many of them. But for a race of 5,000, we'll split people to blocks of 500 people. So we're gonna have 10 blocks. From blocks to 3 to 10, what we do is we're gonna avail room for these people on the road, downtown Athens or at the marathon area, so they can have available to them 1.5 meters around while they're standing or walking. So it's a personal responsibility when they go to their block to keep the distance and protect themselves. We avail them the space to do it. When they reach the block 2, which is the previous to block 1, the starting block, then we have designed, we'll design on the road 500 spots, 1.5 meters apart from each other, left, right, back, and front. So people, when go to block 2, they have to stay on the specific spot, 500 of them, and prepare themselves to move likewise when they go to block 1, and there will have 500 more spots on the road. So just imagine if you take a picture for up above, the first 2 blocks, people will be on lines, in lines of 9 people in each line and 55 lines per block. So the first 2 blocks in total, 110 lines, they will be on a specific spot on the road. And then the other blocks just having the room to protect themselves 1.5 meters. And the other big difference is that usually in the past, we had a gun and the block is moving all together, not block number 1, block number 2. In this occasion, we'll have not a gun this time, but just a horn, and people will be departing in lines of 9 people. So 9 people depart, and then after 4 seconds, next horn, 9 people depart, next one, 9 people depart. So that's the way this time we're gonna do it. People will be departing at 9 people per 0.5 meters apart. You know that, as I told you, we're gonna have a specific spot underneath the start arc. And then for the first 200 meters, we'll have lines like in track and field, in tracks. So people, they will follow at least for 200 meters the lines until they start merging and keep going for the marathon course. By doing that, we secure that where they're steady, 1.5 meters will be apart, and when they start running, will be a part of 10 meters, because this 4 seconds difference between the lines in the start time will provide to them more or less 8 to 10 meters difference when they start. Keep in mind that we make the blocking according to the times they submit. So the faster go first, the slower later, so that will increase the distance between the people that depart from the people they are following. And by doing this good job in blocking and according to the times they submit, we feel that we'll have a course of 40 kilometers with runners actually being in one single line with a distance between them, except the time they pass by the other runners. For this process pass by, we give them a recommendation to stay away, 1.5 meter or 2 meters away when they're passing by. Just imagine we have calculated for the Athens Marathon, which is a linear course starting from Marathon and finishing in Athens, inside the Panathinaikos Stadium, which is the original course actually, the first ever for the marathon sport. We figure out that by the time that the winner of the marathon will be finishing at the stadium, the last runner will be departing from the marathon area. So just imagine a 42 kilometers line of runners, full of runners running the marathon. So this is more or less the concept for the people to keep in mind. And then you take this one for the 5K, for the 10K, it goes on. Just to complete, if I'm not giving you a hard time, that the 10K is on Saturday. So it's a different day, the day before the marathon. And there we're going to have 2 different races within a time of 6 hours in total of 2 different 10Ks of 5,000 each. 5K is in the same morning like the marathon, but the 5K is in downtown Athens, while the marathon will be starting at the marathon area 40 kilometers away. So it's actually the same time, but 2 different cities, Marathon and Athens. So that's why we reach this number of 30,000 participants, which sounds very big for the COVID-19 era. And it's a big deed, or we're trying to be bold, and we're gonna work very hard to make it happen, and trying to take advantage of the very few cases of coronavirus in Greece, even now that we open up tourism.
Fantastic, thank you. Just a quick one before we move on. There's a question from Paolo Leite there in terms of how you said stretched along the whole course. What will be your total start time from the time the first runner goes to the time the last runner leaves?
Well, you will usually give a time, total time for a person, for an Athens to finish the Athens Marathon. In the past, we had 8 hours limit. This year, we'll make it to the 7 hours. So we'll make sure by the time that the start one starts from the marathon area, we'll provide 7 hours for this person to finish. So actually, we'll start very early in the morning, 7:30 to 8 o'clock, and we'll be finishing around 6 p.m. in the afternoon.
Wow.
So it's a long day.
There's not many major cities that are going to give you those kind of road closures. Congratulations. That's incredible.
Yeah, you know, it's Athens is a city of the original marathon. We have very much connected to the history. And so all authorities, the police, the health authorities, a number of non-governmental organizations, a number of people from the medical society, plus almost 4,000 to 5,000 volunteers. They will assist us in doing that this year. And yes, we haven't done it yet. So that's our plan. So I'm listening very careful to Mike and Alcino and Dave to see what I can learn. Plus, we are reading all the protocols from around the world to make sure that we have covered as much as we can from the experiences they are having from around the world, doing this either with smaller races or medium-sized races.
Wonderful, thank you, Dave. Let's come to you. Obviously, different style of event, mountain bike event, and a trail run. You know, some similarities, some differences. Any things that you'd like to share operationally that you think will be useful for people watching, please?
Well, yeah, not as complex as the Athens Marathon, that's for sure. You know, a lot lesser numbers, so we're anticipating about 1,000 mountain bikers, and the trail run gets about 500. This setup area at the start, same or similar processes as Makis explained there, where a wave start rather than a mass start. Once it commences, managing people on the course, managing the social distancing there, pretty much sorts itself out, particularly in the cycling, the bike part of it. A bike or two bikes apart is the equivalent of 6 feet or 1.5 meters. So that spaces things out. Just reinforcing those behaviours on course. Allowing people to pass where possible. It's fairly simple in terms of being able to deliver that distancing. For us, certainly, that's amazing what they're doing in the Athens Marathon. That's a takeaway for our big HBF run for a reason here, where we have 35,000. That's not till next May, so things may change from then. But good learnings from that.
Great, thanks, Dave. Let's come back to transmission mitigation. So interested again, maybe might keep coming back to you, but in terms of the some of the things you've done to mitigate, but have there been any linked cases that have come back to any of your events? You've got contact tracing, all that kind of stuff. Some advice in terms of some of those measures that you put in place.
Yeah, from what we know, based on customer service, not getting reports, nothing popping up on social, we're pretty accessible to our customer. There have been no reports of anyone becoming symptomatic after our event. I think, as we went through the risk analysis internally from a legal standpoint, which I'm sure everyone has done, I think the reality of it is it's hard to point back to, where someone could specifically get coronavirus, right? I could go to an event, but I could also leave and go to a gas station and pump gas and get it that way, right? So we're not concerned from a legal perspective. We obviously want to do what's safe for our customers and our staff. So there was nothing to report on that we were concerned about.
That's great. And so, from the contact tracing, obviously everyone's registered, who's there, they checked in, participants checked in, volunteers checked in, staff, suppliers, all that kind of stuff. So, if there's any advice that you can give, and we've got a whole mix purposely here of, big professional organizations like Spartan, big marathon, and small, kind of community style events, capturing people's details in the database was enough, or did you go any further than that in terms of on the day digital? I know you said you had, people running questionnaires and whatever. Was there timestamps and all that kind of stuff that you had? Any advice you could give in terms of that contact tracing for people that you think would be useful?
Yeah, we talked through the process of how we'd handle it. We're lucky in that, people come and they get their chip at the event that morning of. And so they would show up, and the minute they register and go through the registration tent, we know when they've landed in market, right? We know when they cross the start line. We know when they cross the finish line. So those are 3 important data points. So in the event that we had gotten a report that said, hey, just want to let you guys know I've tested positive for COVID, we would then analyze the situation and say, okay, this person showed up here, they across the start line here and finish, and they're around these 10 people for the majority of the time, right? And then we'd have the discussion internally to say, all right, what are the next steps? Do we let these people know? And most likely we would have.
Yeah,
so we're fortunate that a lot of our processes were already in place to facilitate the ability to kind of manage that situation.
Alcino, in your instance, you seem to indicate everything was fine while they were on the course. How did you manage any kind of merging? How long was your race? Sorry?
5K.
5K. So, small field, but they're all pretty much spread out with that social distancing,
Yes.
No gathering, moved on. Any follow-up issues that you've had, anyone indicating that they've tested? No?
No, any case, and everybody is eager to start in the next race. So there's a list of people wanting to enter the race. So no problems till now. We follow the more or less the procedures that Makis has talked about in the Athens Marathon, but in a smaller scale, of course, except the lines. We didn't have the lines, but that's a very good suggestion. for bigger events, of course.
Yeah, so you're talking about the lines around the corner, because the photos I saw of your event, you seem to have grids on the start line, but it was then just everybody ran off.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they formed the line naturally, and every person was more than 5 meters apart from the other, one or other. I don't know the term to pass through, but
yeah.
Everything went really fine.
Fantastic, that's great. Let's move on to volunteers and spectators. So Dave, you know, we've spoken on a number of different forums about volunteers. You're a little bit off from your event, but you know, in terms of responsive volunteers instead of, you know, special treatment, Mike spoke about obviously the importance of staff, which is clearly paid staff and contractors and volunteers, but any particular measures that you put in place which were, you know, maybe even scrutinized by the authorities when you were putting your permits in place? Were they just focused on the event as a whole or spectators, or was there a focus on what you were doing with your staff that was important in terms of getting the approval process, and what you might be doing that's obviously important from a duty of care?
Well, specifically around training them, I think, in, you know, in including you know, probably a more comprehensive induction process around. It's all very well having, you know, COVID safe plans for your events. You know, if you've got a large workforce and, you know, some of them you don't have a lot of contact with until the day, just making sure you've got, you know, a robust and thorough, you know, induction process, not just for volunteers, but obviously for you know, staff and contractors as well, which Mike alluded to. Probably, you know, one of the more important and different things as well is sort of appointing, whether you call them a chief hygiene officer for the event as well, because, you know, we're all new to this, and so just making sure that you do have someone at an event that's, you know, that you know, doing that, you know, just making sure everyone's doing the right thing. They're not there to sort of police it, but, you know, just to help people, you know, if there's any understanding or misunderstanding, or, you know, provide clarity around what it is we're trying to achieve. I think that's a new role, you know, for our event, you know, but critical in being able to, you know, sort of deliver to the plan. Identifying perhaps, you know, traditionally we have, you know, a good amount of volunteers that are in that vulnerable age, sort of the more senior ones, particularly at regional events. You know, we've relied heavily on community groups who are, you know, possibly in that retirement age. So, you know, if they are, you know, looking to be involved in the event, you know, potentially a change of role where, you know, minimise the contact, you know, with other participants or masses as well, which is a difficult thing to do because, you know, they love being a part of it. So, you know, that's one that we're working through at the moment as well.
Thanks, Dave. We're getting quite a lot of questions coming in, so why don't we jump into a couple of those. So quite a lot of them around Athens. Emily Carpenter, have these COVID safe procedures been commercially viable, or are you taking the financial hit to continue the events with the hope that continued growth and participation and exposure will help in the future? Can we throw to you on that one, Mike?
Yeah, and that's my next job, is how do we scale all this and make this economically viable as a business? So, you know, the first race, admittedly, we lost a bunch of money on. It was our white paper, it was our case study domestically in the US. We were probably spent an incremental $50,000 to get all those practices in place. The big ones were, I didn't talk about this before, we tested all the staff when they arrived for COVID-19 using a nasal swab. And so that was expensive because we use a very customized approach to that. We just didn't go down to the local pharmacy. We brought in a doctor and had it done with quick results in a couple of days. That was expensive. We normally share hotel rooms for staff, and we didn't this time. We kept them in their own hotel rooms. That was expensive. And just little things, all the various, the hand sanitizer we brought in from China, all the different PPE, the signage, it just all added up. And so And then from the other side, on the revenue side, you know, we really limited participation with the amount of people we can push through every hour. So the next step is, you know, we feel like we can push more people through every hour. We definitely feel like we can. And then how do we attack some of these operational issues that were really expensive? We feel we can still be safe and achieve the same quality of safety, the same level of safety, but just make it more viable from an economic standpoint.
And so in all of those cases, you kind of reached capacity. So it wasn't a case of participants are saying, well, we're scared, we don't want to turn up. That was, you know, the limits were ceilings that were created by you or the authorities? Yeah,
in terms of the throughput per hour in Florida, yeah, in those cases, we limited, especially in the morning, we reached our limits. Overseas, it's been amazing. In Central Europe, they're selling out their events in a week or so. And so there's definitely no shortage of demand. I think there's a consumer confidence issue, and I don't think it's around, from what my perspective is, customers aren't scared of the virus. They're scared of the business, right? Like, do I sign up for something? I don't even know if you're going to have a race, because they see the heavy hand of the authorities. And so I think people are just the lack of consumer confidence around signups is around not from getting sick, but from just the, you know, will there be an event, right?
Yeah, that's a great insight. Yeah, thank you. Let's go down. How will Athens organize an expo? There's a couple here, so given the time's flying a bit, why don't we just ask you to address that one, and also what about participants traveling to the start at the Athens Marathon? Obviously, you mentioned you're a point-to-point, you're outside the city, so quickly on the expo and also in terms of transport to the start. And just quickly, I did another poll there, which I'll put the results out. Interesting, asking people what they see as their biggest challenges at the moment. I must admit, I thought funding would be up the top there, but it's people talking about COVID-safe plans and getting approvals and permits. I'll just share that into the group at the moment. But Makis, if you wouldn't mind just touching on those,
yes,
please. Thank you.
In terms of the expo is being organized along with a registration center, so the people come and pick up the bib numbers, the badge, and everything. So the expo will be organized according to protocols, health protocols that the Greek government has imposed for the expos. At this moment, it's not very clear yet what is going to be the final protocol. So talking with the expo organizer, I will say we have a question mark, and we need to confirm that if the expo is able to be done in order for the organizer to be able to do it. So the expo is under question, but the registration center will be there, and all the policies for the registration center about the people, about the masks, about how they're going to approach. We have expanded time for the registration center to operate. We are all done with that in terms of permits. Now, in terms of people going to marathon, we do that. We transport the people to marathon every year. So actually we use 300 to 400 buses of 50 seats each one capacity to transport people to the marathon area. This time we're going to have buses again, the same number of buses, but with a half capacity. So we're not going to put in a bus 50 people, but 25 this time, in order to make sure that even in the bus, on the bus, they have the proper distance amongst them. And then we have designed, and we'll be designing every day in detail all the operations for the buses, how we're going to get them from Athens, how they're going to get off the buses in marathon area, for the 2 different waves of 5,000 people to have a different way to get to their blocks, and goes on. So it's a very detailed operation planning. We haven't done it, I need to be honest with all of you, but taking advantage of the previous experience, plus whatever is happening around the world, we are really going to a very, very detailed plan to make sure that we keep the distancing as close as to the proper one. We know that there are places that we're going to lose it, so we try to minimize that.
Can I ask you quickly while I'm with you as well? So on the commercial question, where do you expect that this is going to be commercially viable for you, or is this an investment year for Athens Marathon?
No, it's going to be commercial viable as long as we keep these numbers. So the total income coming out of registration plus the sponsors will make it commercial viable. Of course, the sponsors, we are negotiating with all of them now. They were very good with us. They understand the mission. they understand the cause, they understand the importance of the event itself, but in general for the society to restart and the market to restart and the people start feeling again going to normality. So our sponsors are really very generous, and it looks like that the sponsorship income plus the registration income will make our event very viable.
Wonderful, that's great to hear. Rushan and Nerida Rig, I see you've got your hands up. Can I ask you just to type your questions in either the chat box or the Q&A, please, so we can maximize the time for the panelists to be answering questions and so on. Dave, just interested to go back to you. Obviously, yours is still to happen, but in terms of some of the things that you've had to put in place, is this the normal entry numbers that you're expecting, and is there economic impact? It's still a commercially viable event with sponsors and participants?
Yes, it is. Yeah, look, it is the great unknown, this far out. Mike alluded to the fact that people are still concerned whether there'll be an event or not, and we touched on communication as part of the brief, and we're finding our messaging going out is that it's full steam ahead, that the 19th of September we'll have a mountain bike event and a trail run. It's got to be asterisks. We've seen what's happened on the other side of Australia with one state going backwards in terms of moving through the phases. So we're aware of that. There has been other events in WA that have been cancelled for different reasons. Despite our clear communication and messaging around we're going ahead when other events fall over, the question's still asked. Do you find yourself repeating that or creating assurances around the fact that it is there, or is on rather, and also probably being a little bit creating a different refund policy, working with our online registration provider, so the money is being held in trust. We're communicating that that money will be held until the event's delivered as well. So if the event is cancelled for COVID reasons, then apart from a small admin fee, then people will be refunded for that purpose as well. So we've also given people the opportunity through, and most big events, or some big events do it, created that change of heart policy. So, if people decide that, for whatever reason, if they've taken out that additional insurance with us, if they don't want to go into a mass gathering, they can enact that change of heart policy and get their refund on that as well. So, but yeah, numbers wise, the feel is with a sort of a longer period of no events, the appetite is definitely there, or being communicated. Indications are that through bike sales, a lot more people are out recreating, so we can capture that market and get people into the mass participation community. Then we're confident of achieving our goals and numbers.
Fantastic, thank you. Folks, we're pretty much out of time. There's a couple of questions still, so I'm just going to pick up a couple of key points to summarize for those of you that have got to drop off, and then we will try and come and cover the questions that are remaining. I thought, really great feedback from Mike in terms of the survey. Participants saying they were safer at a Spartan event than they were in the grocery store, and I must admit that's kind of a point that I make almost every day. You see things happening in everyday life that seem to be less safe than they can be in our events. So great to get that kind of feedback, and I think that's a great quote for any of you that are speaking to councils and authorities, that this is the feedback that's come from an actual Spartan event that's happened. One of the key points, the volunteer part of it, making sure that there's induction and training. No point having the protocols and not having them in a position where they know how to apply those. From a participant perspective, Mike made the point of as soon as they stopped the kind of flow that was set in place, stop here, queue here, and life returned back to normal. Alcino said the same thing. As they crossed the finish line, they were hugging and hanging out together. So I guess there's a degree of control over the course. You need to put those in place, but maybe more guidelines needed if necessarily, if there's a learning. Two different ends of the spectrum from commercial viability. Mike and Spartan, thank you, investing for the industry and obviously for your own business, but we all learn from the investments that others are making. So that's great that we can have people that are doing these things and sharing them. Obviously Athens, hopefully commercially viable, and Dave, that you get yours. I'm assuming yours a small event, Alcino, but with the fact that you've gone from 400 to 100, probably it wasn't as commercially viable as normal, but good to be able to get it away and supporting the industry there. And I thought a really great insight there from Mike is that people are scared not because of their safety, but that an event might not go ahead and it'll be cancelled by the authorities or an organization that might not then be in a position to be able to refund their money. So those are a couple of the key ones that I mentioned as shared in the beginning, or maybe I didn't. This is live on Facebook Live on the Mass Participation World Facebook page. If you want to share it with any of your friends, the recording will go on the Mass Participation World YouTube channel as well, if anyone would like to watch it. And then obviously, as I say, we're on the time, but a couple of questions we'll just try and pick up if we can. If any of the panelists need to drop off, obviously, please feel free to. Just going through here. Joe Osborne, have these larger events got communicable disease virus insurance in place? I find the area of liability regarding COVID-19 a bit grey. Do we simply rely on waivers for the time being? Mike, maybe do you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I have to double check with our attorneys, but I don't think we went. I think we ran our diligence with our insurance provider just to make sure everything's okay. But I think I alluded to this before. It'd be hard for someone to point back to a specific moment in time where they contracted a virus, right? Like I said, you could go to the gas station after you leave an event and that get it there. So I think the risk is lower there. But we did have a comprehensive waiver. We added language to it. We had some people sign something day of that even said they didn't have any symptoms, as well as that verbal check.
Thank you. And we ran one of these webinars was on insurance a couple of weeks back, and the consensus was pretty much impossible to get COVID now because it's pre-existing. So if you had an existing policy that had pandemic in it, then you're potentially covered. But no one's going to insure you in this day and age for COVID. But obviously the landscape may change when we go further on. Paolo Leite, for those that have done events, were there any authorities present to make sure procedures were put in place? Were organizers left alone to put in place the protective measures? Maybe go to you there, Alcino. Did you have a whole bunch more local authorities that were checking in to see that you were following the rules?
Not specifically to check what the measure was, but that there were authorities present. But I think they trust in us, so yeah. No need to verify everything.
Yeah, great. And Mike, you've obviously been in 4 different jurisdictions now. How have you find that? Has it varied from one to another, or you've pretty much been left to your devices?
I think for the most part, most of the diligences and the work has been done up front, just to share our protocols and to build that confidence. And then the normal show up on race day and just make sure everything's okay based on how they typically do it. So I haven't heard or seen of anything out of the ordinary from this perspective.
I mean, one of the things that Dave touched on, not so much people coming down from the council, but in Australia, I think in pretty much every state, it's now law as I understand it, to have a COVID safety officer if you have an event. So you actually have to have an appointed officer. Is that correct, Dave?
It's advisable. It's not law.
It's not law. Okay.
Yeah, we've included it in our COVID safety plans. So yeah, I think it'll go a long way to getting your event signed off and approved. Yeah,
I think I'm right in saying I hosted an AMSI webinar a couple of weeks back, and I think in New South Wales and Victoria it's fairly much close to compulsory. Yeah. Last question here, I think. So for Athens Marathon, are they expecting local persons or tourism as well as visitors? I think you said there's going to be some tourists coming in, aren't there, Makis?
Well, tourism is open, but I have to tell you, out of the 10,500 registered people so far for the marathon, we have almost 3,000 people from other countries. So it's going to be an international event with a large participation, and we expect that will go up to 4,000 with the remaining seats, because more or less the Greek market has been covered. So we're going to have foreigners according to the laws of their countries, our country, how they enter our country, what they have to do. And yes, it's going to be an international event.
Fantastic. That's amazing. Last one again for you. You've been in the hot seat tonight, Makis. How many volunteers? What about elite athletes? You're going to have an elite field as well?
No, we're not going to have elite athletes, but the Greek elite athletes, because every time we organize the national championships of marathon during the Athens Marathon. But this year, we are not going to invite elite athletes. If they want to come, they are very welcome, but not this program for this year will be postponed. And in terms of volunteers, we are planning for 4,000 volunteers. As Dave said, it's a challenge this year because of groups we have, especially from schools, so they're very hesitant, plus people from an age and above that we're not going to forbid them, but I guess that they're going to be a little more sensitive or scared to join us this year because of the COVID. But on the other hand, the community is very well aware of what we're going to do, and they're very keen to help us do it the right way in order to protect the public health.
Wonderful. Just one last one. You broke up, as you said, the number of volunteers. I didn't catch it. Can you repeat how many volunteers, please?
4,000.
4,000. Thank you.
4,000.
4,000. Thank you, Makis. Folks, that's time, and we've managed to catch all the questions. Thanks for staying on for those extra little while to the panelists and those of you that are here. Thanks again to everyone who's listened in. Next week, a reminder, content creation. A big thank you to our panelists, Dave Budge, Alcino Pereira, Makis Asimakopoulos, and Mike Morris. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Wherever you are, and evening. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot.